Mr. President, welcome to Framingham High School. Mr. President, presidential visits to Framingham have been few and far between. Framingham was one of the whistle stops for President Harry Truman in 1948. And in 1889, President Benjamin Harrison was greeted by thousands at a train station not far from here. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge some of the people who were instrumental in helping to make this bill become law. First, the Deputy Secretary of Education, Madelein Kunin, the former governor of the state of Vermont. To Senator Jim Jeffords from the state of Vermont. To the primary sponsor in the House of Representatives, Congressman Bill Ford from the state of Michigan. And the education senator in the history of the United States, Senator Ted Kennedy from the state of Massachusetts. We also have with us Senator Claiborne Pell from the state of Rhode Island. Congressman Jack Reed from the state of Rhode Island. And our great congressman from the state of Massachusetts, Congressman Joe Kennedy. And we have a few state officials here who absolutely merit recognition, beginning with the Senate President, William Bulger, who is an education advocate. The State Auditor, Joe DiNucci. Your own state senator, the chairman of the Education Committee in the Massachusetts Legislature, Senator Dave Magnani. State Representative Barbara Gray from the town of Framingham. And John Stefanini, the state representative from the town of Framingham. And I'd also like to mention that we have our gubernatorial candidate from the Democratic Party here today, Mark Roosevelt, and his running mate, Bob Massey. We have with us as well from the town of Framingham, the chairman of the school committee, Chris Petrini, and the rest of the school committee members, the school superintendent, Dr. Jean Thayer, Principal Robert Flaherty, and President of the Student Council, Jeremy Spector. To everyone here assembled, welcome. We have gathered here to witness the signing of a major legislative initiative which will improve markedly the Framingham school system and the school systems like it across the country. There are between 47 and 50 languages spoken by students in the schools of Framingham. And there is a broad range. There is a broad range of socioeconomic backgrounds here. 1 in 4 students is enrolled in the free lunch program. This diversity brings strength. 90% of Framingham High School graduates go on to some form of higher education. In the last 6 years, their teams have finished first in the state academic decathlon 2 times and second place 4 times. Last year, with over 300 schools competing, Framingham finished second in the New England math competition, and in the last 5 years, they have finished in the top three of those years. Mr. President, we thank you for your efforts to strengthen our schools and to enhance the educational opportunities afforded to children, and we thank you for coming to Framingham. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Deputy Secretary of Education Madelein Kunin, who has been improving the quality of education as the hallmark of her career. In her 3 terms as Governor of Vermont, and since taking her current position with the administration, she has distinguished herself as an innovative problem solver and as a dynamic, reform-minded leader in the education universe. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the former Governor of Vermont, Deputy Secretary of Education, Madelein Kunin.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. President, honored guests, and Congressman Markey, this is a great day for Framingham, a great day for Massachusetts, and a great day for the children of the United States of America. And in my capacity here today, I want to bring you special greetings from Secretary of Education Richard Riley. We spoke with him this morning, and some of you may know he recently had an operation, and he's recovering very, very well. And he wishes he could be here, but we expect him back on the job very shortly. But today's event, in a sense, is a testimony to his work thus far. And recently, a newspaper called the Washington Post noted that Secretary Riley is perhaps the most quiet, the most persistent, and the most effective member of the President's cabinet. And Senator Kennedy, I think it is most fitting that this bill is signed here in Framingham, Massachusetts. You know, and this political season of spin sometimes has a dizzying effect, and we don't know what to believe, what's true, what isn't, what's hype, what isn't, and I'm sure it's hard for young people to sort out the political process. But I can tell you the simple truth, that your own Senator Kennedy is the most hardworking, most dedicated senator for education in the United States Senate. Without his leadership in the Senate, and without Congressman Ford's leadership in the House, and you'll be shortly hearing from him, we would not have the most stunning list of education bills that have been signed in these last few months, the most stunning list we've ever had in 30 years. National service, student loan reform, Goals 2000, School to Work, expansion of Head Start, and Safe and Drug-Free Schools Act to make sure that schools like Framingham are not only good places to learn, but safe places to learn. Now, when Lyndon Johnson signed this bill 30 years ago, he did think that with one stroke of the pen, and we all believed that then, that you could in fact change education by simply signing a law. But today we know that that's the first step. What really will make this law work is what happens next in Framingham, in Massachusetts, in states and communities all over the country. Because it's the teachers, the students, the principals, the people like you who do the hard work of teaching and learning every day. But there are some lessons to be learned from this piece of legislation that we can put to good use. One, we wouldn't be signing this law today if we didn't have bipartisan support. Two, we had a strong coalition of governors, the Congress, educators, parents, teachers, unions, and business that all work together for success. And three, it's based on this fundamental belief that all the children here and the children you represent can achieve to higher standards. Now, Mr. President, you have often said that there is a solution somewhere to every problem in this country. And there is a good school somewhere for some children in this country. What these bills and this legislation will assure is that there are good schools everywhere for all children in this country. And that's what is our task and our responsibility. I can't conclude without giving you a message that I know Secretary Riley would want to give to the students here. Study hard, stay in school, and I'm thrilled that 90% of you go on to further education. The fundamental truth is what you learn determines what you earn and how happy your life is going to be. And two, to the parents, stay involved, become involved in your children's education. You do, in fact, have the greatest influence on their success in school. So turn off the TV from time to time, check on the homework, and make sure your children read and are read to. And with that kind of partnership between parents, local officials represented here, national officials, state officials, we will have excellence and equity in our public education system. It's now my pleasure to introduce a neighbor, a kinsman, you might say, from Vermont, a man who represents the bipartisan spirit with which this law and others have become a reality. A person who worked day in and day out in shaping this legislation, along with other members of his committee, along with Senator Pell, who I'm pleased to see here, and many others, but a man who has always put the issues above party, Senator Jim Jeffords from Vermont.
Thank you. Thank you. This is an exciting day for all of us. I'm thrilled to be with you. This is a great crowd of young people, and it makes all the effort that we put in worthwhile. It's always good to be on a podium with a fellow Vermonter, Madelein Kunin, who did much for our education in Vermont as well as she is doing now in Washington. Because to us, being an educator and a Vermonter is the highest title that anyone can ever have in our state. Because we have a little plug for Vermont. We have the best, as far as per capita basis, effort in education across the centuries of any state in the Union. So, all right, come up to Vermont and see us all. Mr. President, We took 6 major steps towards restructuring American future through education this session. It was rough. The end results were so good, 6 new major initiatives. And this is the beginning of restructuring American education and our future. Next, we must make sure that you have the resources as you go down planning your goals 2000 in order to reach that goals. It could not have happened, however, only because this administration made education such a high priority, and because people like Ted Kennedy, the chairman of the Labor Committee, showed the good sense, the great patience, and the leadership to keep this a bipartisan issue through some of the very most partisan times in the history of Congress. I want to thank him now publicly for all he has done for education. And also, I bring greetings, Claiborne, from Bob Stafford, who knew you would be here today, and he wanted to say his congratulations to you for the tremendous service you have given this nation for education. No one has done more. But we were aided with leadership from my side as well. It was a bipartisan matter. Senator Nancy Kassenbaum from Kansas and Bill Goodling contribute immeasurably to our successes this year. Bill Goodling, because he is a former superintendent and teacher, kept us going right down the straight line. We've seen the results of partisanship this year, where pointing fingers takes precedent over producing results. And we have seen the results of bipartisanship, one which is here today in today's ceremony. There is no argument as to which is better for this country, and which is better for the children of Framingham and Massachusetts and the children of Ferrisburg, Vermont. So we are here for you, because you are the ones that we want to see the progress made. Now it's my pleasure to introduce a longtime friend of mine who was there when I came to the Congress some 20 years ago, back in the 94th Congress. And that was the beginning of my realization of the importance of developing better education in this country, where we developed a special education program. And I work with Bill Ford. I've worked with him through the years. He's the chairman of the committee. He's retiring. But I would not leave this podium without telling you what he has done for education. And Bill, Bob Stafford sends his respects to you and says he welcomes you as part of the Stafford, now Ford Loans. That's the direct lending program. And he's glad to have you with him, and he knows that you're going to do a lot of business together. Bill, come here and take your bows for all the work you have done in making this day so possible.
Thank you very much. I must tell you, people, where I'm from in Michigan, I'm not used to having Republicans say nice things like that about me. But I think it's an illustration that at a time when the rest of the Congress is not regarded very highly by the people because it seems to be nothing but one of us snarling at another about some issue that people don't understand, that in the middle of all that's been going on for the last 2 years, President Clinton has stayed on our back to remember what he said when he first came to town. I think we've got to make education our #1 objective, and we've got to make an attempt to move education ahead. Now, I can't accuse the president of ever calling us off when we got partisan, but I can tell you that he constantly monitored what was going on with these education initiatives that Jim Jeffords just talked about, to make sure that Ted Kennedy on his side and I on my side took advantage of every opportunity to work with Republicans of goodwill to give us a truly bipartisan education policy for this country. Would, by God, we could do that for the other important issues facing this nation. Now, I'm not running this time, but if I were, this would be the last time I'd say something nice about a Republican until after November. Mr. President, when you sign that bill today, you will be signing the largest single commitment to children in elementary and secondary schools, and even before they get to school, ever signed by any president in the history of this country. And Mr. President, it would not be possible unless you decided it was a matter of utmost importance and gave it that importance by pushing and prodding every step of the way. You have in place one of the projects that Governor Bill Clinton started, and that was Goals 2000. We had trouble passing that legislation. The trouble was not with my party, but with the President's party under previous administrations. This time, people came together, and Bill Clinton brought us together, and it's now on the books. The legislation that the President's going to sign today will be providing $60 billion, that's billion with a B, not an M, dollars over the next 5 years to local schools and school districts to carry out the objectives of the several programs that are in it, and to carry out the objectives of Goals 2000 so that indeed we can keep the promise of Goals 2000. This is, as they say in Washington, putting your money where your mouth is. We talked for years about having national standards, some way to measure what we expected schools were going to do for and to our children. And we're moving in that direction, but it won't happen if we just preach to the schools across the country and tell them they have to do it. We have to give them the resources to do the job. And this legislation does not tell any school district or school administrator or school committee or school board how to do it. It just says, here are some resources we're making available to you to do things better than we've done them in the past. I can't think of any more appropriate place for this legislation to be signed than in a state represented by the most steadfast and hard fighter for education I've known in my 30 years in the Congress, Senator Ted Kennedy. But before you people in the press write that I came up here just to say something nice about Ted Kennedy, you ought to understand that over 300 years ago, public education got its start in Massachusetts. This is the state, and your predecessors are the people who gave public education to America, probably the greatest step ever taken since the beginning of the conception of our country to fulfill Thomas Jefferson's dream of a democracy made up of educated people who could understand their government and how it was supposed to work with them and for them. No better place could I imagine being for this, the greatest initiative for elementary and secondary education, than here in Massachusetts, where it all started about 310 years ago. You should be very proud of that. As a matter of fact, the school in which it started, I understand, is still operating in Boston. You should still look back once in a while and take pride. There are people in this country who've lost faith in their schools. Massachusetts has not lost faith in its schools, and you've been tested for more than 100 years, 150 years longer than the schools in my state. You had public education for almost 150 years before my state became a state. So we look back this way and look to what your forebears did as a very special value to the quality of life we have in the Midwest. And I'm here on behalf of those people to say thank you. And thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Senator Kennedy, for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Congressman Bill Ford, for your kind words and for your presence. Mr. President, we welcome you to Massachusetts, and we welcome you to Framingham High School. This is as Congressman Ford has pointed out, this is a state that puts a very high priority on education. We don't have the great natural resources that exist in many other parts of the nation, and we have had to rely upon the commitment of young and old, of school teachers and students, of parents, of local communities, to give education the priority. That is the only way that we have been able to be a part of this great nation, to make our contribution, and to be a source of inspiration in so many areas of activity for our country. I want to thank those that are here today and who have been good and wonderful friends. Congressman Ford, who has really had a lifetime in the Congress of the United States and devoted his energies and educations day in and day out. There will be many people from Massachusetts who won't know Congressman Ford's name, but for every one of us who read the history of education in our country will know that the difference it's made for families in our state. Bill Ford, we're glad to have you here, and we thank you very much for all that you have done. Madelein Kunin, who we work with, we're grateful for you, for your leadership in the department. We think of Dick Riley, who is not here today, who was a governor of a state that moved to South Carolina in such an important way, challenging its young and old in education reform, and we wish the very best for Secretary Riley, and we're thinking of him today. I want to thank Jim Jeffords for being here, and not only for being here today, but for being there with Nancy Kassenbaum, with other members of our Human Resource Committee on so many of these endeavors that we really celebrate today, because the legislation that we signed today is really the engine, the economic engine, the financial support for so many of the education reforms. And Jim Jeffords has been a strong advocate for education and education reform, and we have worked closely together, and we look forward to continue that kind of endeavor in the years ahead. Ed Markey, I thank you for being here and for your friendship and commitment in education. And I want to just take a brief moment to recognize some of those who have been in the forefront of our state. I think many of us understand that education is really a local responsibility, a state interest, and we at the federal level identify some areas of special priority and try and address those. And that's certainly true today, but we have had some important successes here in our own state. Mark Roosevelt, who is the chairman of the Senate committee, he's a candidate for governor, but I have worked with him on the education reforms to ensure that what we were doing at the federal level was going to be tied in to the state, and I think many of us are very hopeful with all of the efforts that are being made in this Congress and also at the state level that both of these areas will come together and we will strengthen our education for young people in Massachusetts. I'm glad that you're here today. David Magnani, who's been one of our great leaders of Framingham's own, where we welcome his presence. Our Republican State Senator Jane Swift from North Adams, I hope is here today. We're glad that know that she has been involved in the education programs. And I also want to say a very special word of commendation to Claiborne Pell. Jim Jeffords mentioned the long bipartisan tradition on education policy. Senator Stafford and Senator Pell, for some 20 years, 25 years, developed that concept. And a part of the reasons that we have been able to work and find that working partnership has been because of the sense of expectations that families have and the children have, and parents have, that education progress must be bipartisan. And Claiborne Pell and Senator Stafford were really the individuals who were there at the very beginning when, in the post-1960 period, we began to address these issues of educational opportunity, and I welcome his presence. Let me say that this is an exciting day, and I'll just take a very brief moment. And that is, Mr. President, we want to thank you very much for the focus and attention and the support and the priority that you have placed on the education of the young people for this nation. There's been impressive impressive progress that has been made, but I can tell you, and every legislator can tell you, that unless you have a president that is pointing the way, that is outlining the priorities for a nation, that is putting this on the front burner of the agenda for the American Congress and for the American people, we would not have been able to achieve some of the important building blocks that we have seen in this Congress. We have seen the expansion of the Head Start program to reach the earliest children from 0 to 3 with parenting, counseling, and help and assistance. We have seen the changes in the Chapter 1 program that we'll be celebrating today to give greater flexibility to local communities and to parents and to teachers to involve themselves in a bottom-up reform in terms of education reform. We see the Goals 2000, hopefully working with the activities here in our own Commonwealth of Massachusetts, that says that more than 85% of the funding will go to local schools that are involved in education reform. We have seen the School to Work program to be able to be responsive to the 65 or 70% of the children that do not go on to additional training and educational opportunity in colleges, and too often are out there lost in an economy. And we're trying to give some focus and attention to these young people and give them a greater sense of hope for the future. That is something that is very important. And under the President's leadership, the idea that young people would be able to fund their education through student loan programs that would be tied to the same level of interest rates that the federal government is able to borrow at, rather than the commercial rate, will mean the savings of some $4 billion to families over the period of the next 5 years, and some $2 billion to the students themselves. This is important to relief, and to permit the young people to repay those loans as a percent of their income, so that those young people that get help and assistance and go to our very fine universities are able to repay their debt as a percent of income, so that they can be school teachers, they can work in the communities, they can do something to give something back to the community and not be encumbered by the kind of payment. That was all done during the past 2 years. So, Mr. President, we want you to know how grateful we are that you have come to Massachusetts. Horace Mann, who was the great educator and talked about education being the equalizer in our society, really said it best, because he understood that unless we are going to have education, all of our hopes and dreams, whether it relates to the economy or our democratic institutions, cannot be achieved. And I want to tell everyone here in Framingham and everyone in Massachusetts that if we have had some success in trying to do something for the young people that are out in this very fine, outstanding high school today, if we are making some difference to children that are out into Bedford or Fall River or Lowell or Lawrence, whose lives have been enhanced with the improving and the strengthening of the Head Start program, if we have done something about the schools in Springfield or Chicopee, because now that they're going to be a greater opportunity for the young children to achieve academic realization, if because of the changes in the loan repayment, there are going to be young people that are going to go back into the classroom and teach future generations, all of this is beginning to come about. It isn't going to be resolved with the signing of this bill, but I can tell you, we are moving this country along on a commitment to put education where it should be, and we are doing it with a President of the United States that has put this at the top of his agenda. So give a very special welcome to the outstanding young person who's going to introduce the President of the United States, our own Jeremy Spector. Give Jeremy the kind of...
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Thank you, Senator Kennedy. President Clinton, members of Congress, esteemed guests, faculty members, and fellow students, welcome to Framingham High School. It's with great honor. It's with great honor that I'm able to speak to you today. Framingham High School is representative of the diverse population of our country. Thus, it is fitting, Mr. President, that you have decided to sign this momentous bill here in our presence. Framingham High School and schools across the country will benefit greatly from this legislation. For example, like many other schools across the nation, Framingham High School has created programs such as mediation and conflict resolution to encourage violence-free schools as promoted by the bill. Framingham also has an excellent program for English as a second language, and this bill will facilitate improved education for these students. These are merely a few examples of the assistance this bill will give to education in Framingham and to other public school systems across the country. For these achievements, Mr. President, we, the students of Framingham and the United States, wish to applaud you and the bipartisan spirit of the Congress. And it is now my pleasure and distinct honor to introduce the man who should be called the Education President, the President of the United States, Bill Clinton.
Thank you. You know, we wanted to come here because this school has a reputation for academic excellence and because it is so diverse, because it's a school that really looks like America. But if I had known we were going to get such an enthusiastic reception, I would have come yesterday instead of today and just waited. Thank you. It's good. I also want to say a special word of appreciation to your student council president. I thought he did a fine job up here. I can tell you this, if he continues to speak so well, so much to the point, and so briefly, he'll win a lot more elections. It was very impressive. I'd like to thank your principal, Mr. Flaherty, your superintendent, Dr. Thayer, your school board chairman, Mr. Petrini, and all the people here who made this wonderful visit possible. I'd like to thank all the members of Congress who have joined us. I especially want to thank those who have come from other states. Senator Pell and Congressman Reed have come from Rhode Island, and Senator and Mrs. Jeffords are here. We're glad to see them. And I thank Congressman Markey for hosting us, and I thank Congressman Kennedy for coming and bringing his wife and his mother. I'm glad they're all here. Thank you for coming. I want to say just a brief word about those who have spoken. Governor Kunin, who was the governor of Vermont, is now the Deputy Secretary of Education, spoke on behalf of the department, and Secretary Riley, who was the governor of South Carolina. All three of us served as governors together working on these education problems, and I think we've made a real difference bringing a whole different approach to education to Washington. We look at it from the grassroots up, from the point of view of the principals and the teachers and the school board members, and we like to think from time to time we even look at it from the point of view of the students, from the grassroots up, from education at the school level where it should be. I want to say a special word of thanks to Senator Jeffords for what he said, and to Congressman Ford and Senator Kennedy. Let me say that you read a lot and hear a lot about all the fights that go on in Washington and about how things don't get done, but when the history of this time is written, the progress we have made in education will be known chiefly for two things. One is we really did write new ideas into the law, and secondly, we did it in a bipartisan fashion with Republicans and Democrats for all the children of this country. I was sitting up here listening to these fine people speak, wondering what all of our words might mean to the students who are here. Thinking that, trying to remember what it was like when I used to sit over there in the band when I was their age and hold my saxophone. You did a great job today, by the way, and I thank you. And I'd like to try to tell you why this whole thing is important from your point of view. Because this whole education issue is really about your future. 21 months ago, when I moved to Washington to become president, I had some very clear ideas. I wanted to rebuild the American dream, to restore the health of the American economy, to make sure that your future would be the brightest future ever enjoyed by any generation of Americans as you grow into the 21st century, a new and exciting, rapidly changing, and very different time. I knew that we had to do some things that would matter to people in the short run. We had to begin to make our government work for ordinary Americans again, and we've done a pretty good job of that. We passed the family and medical leave law to protect the parents when they need time off from work because their children are sick. And we're immunizing all the kids in this country under the age of 2 by 1996. I see the nurses clapping there. Thank you. Because we want to reward people who are trying to be good parents and good workers, we actually lowered the income taxes of 15 million working families because they make modest wages, and we don't want them to be in poverty if they're working full-time and raising their kids. So we began to do these things, and we started to work to bring the economy back, to bring the deficit down, to invest more in new technologies, to expand trade, and it is working, and the economy's coming back. But over the long run, the United States of America cannot continue to lead the world economically in a world where the average young person will change work 6, 7, 8 times in a lifetime, in a world where what you earn depends on not just what you know, but what you are capable of learning, in a world that is incredibly fast-moving and diverse. We cannot do that unless we develop the learning capacities of every person in this country. That is the key to the long-term survival and strength of the United States. When I was a governor, my administration, and especially my wonderful wife and I, spent most of our time working on what we could do to improve our schools, how we could get the test scores up, how we could get more kids in foreign language, how we could improve mathematics achievement, how more of our young people could be ready to learn when they come to school, how we could facilitate more young people going to college. And I learned over and over again, as I think Governor Kunin said, that there are schools in this country, including this one, that are doing a very good job, sometimes against great odds. They are still doing a good job teaching and learning. But we have some significant challenges we have to face. First of all, we are not as good as we ought to be as a country in taking the things that work well in some school districts and seeing them spread throughout the country. Secondly, we have great challenges because of all the great nations in the world. We are by far the most diverse, racially, ethnically, religiously, economically. Thirdly, we know that the schools have become the home away from home for a lot of children who have enormous personal challenges to face. And all those things mean that we have to be constantly working overtime to try to meet the challenges that we face today and the challenges we know you will face in your lives tomorrow. That's why I worked so hard several years ago to get our country to set a mission, a national set of education goals. Most of you may not know what they are, but I think they're good goals. They're worth repeating. That we will make sure every child shows up for school ready to learn. That we will raise the high school graduation rate to at least 90% of all students, which is the international standard all over the country. That we will make sure our young people learn and are proficient in, by international standards of excellence, basic subjects in English and mathematics and history and geography and languages, and we will learn how to measure whether we are doing that or not at least 3 times during the course of a student's career. That we will lead the world in math and science achievement, not bring up the rear. That our schools will become safe, disciplined, and free of drugs, and that we will develop a system of lifetime learning so that people, no matter how old they are, will always be able to develop new skills, acquire new knowledge, know what they need to know to move forward with confidence. Those are the goals of this nation educationally. They have been adopted by presidents of both parties, by governors of both parties. They have been embraced by educators all across this country. They are now the law of the land, thanks to this Congress. But the important thing about this bill is that it represents a fundamental change in the way the federal government looks at how we should do our job in helping you students achieve those goals. For 30 years, the federal government has shipped money to the states and the local school districts to try to help with problems that needed the money. But mostly, they have done it in ways that prescribed in very detailed manners the rules and regulations your schools had to follow, the rules and regulations your states had to follow in applying for the money and in complying with it. And very often, we had teachers at the grassroots level who said, this doesn't make any sense. This bill changes all that. This bill says the national government will set the goals. We will help develop measurements to see whether Framingham School District is meeting the goals, but you will get to determine how you're going to meet the goals, because the magic of education occurs between the teacher and the students in the classroom, with the parents, with the principals, with the schools supporting it. And you have to see all this stuff we're talking about up here in terms of that. We've expanded the Head Start program, as Senator Kennedy said. These goals have now been written into the law, and 31 of the 50 states have asked for our help in devising a state strategy to meet the goals. The School to Work Opportunities Act, which the Senator mentioned, has now all 50 states working to try to develop statewide systems of apprenticeships so the young people who don't go to college but do want to have good jobs will be able to get at least some post-high school training in ways that help them academically, help them practically, and give them a good start into the future. And that is a very, very important thing. Our nation is the only advanced nation in the world that does not have a system that picks up every single high school graduate who doesn't go to college and gives them some further education and training so they can make a good living, be good citizens, raise a strong family, and contribute to our future. We're going to change that with this legislation. And the college loan program and the national service programs, I want to explain in tandem. You know, in the 1980s, the gap between what a high school graduate earns in his or her first year of work and what a college graduate earns in his or her first year of work doubled. Doubled. Earnings for high school graduates in their first year of work in the United States actually declined in the 1980s. Under the pressure of a global economy where there are a lot of people around the world in developing countries doing jobs for wages we cannot live on, it is clear that it is in the economic interest of the entire United States to get as many young people to go on to college as possible. At the same time, you know, we face even more social challenges, especially among younger children. So we've done two things. One is we changed the college loan program to say you can borrow money at lower interest rates, you can pay it out over a longer period of time. If you take a job that doesn't pay a high wage, you can tie the loan repayment to the salary you make. You'll have to pay it back over more years, but there'll never be a time when, because of the cost of your college education, you can't make a car payment, you can't make your rent payment, you can't meet the basic responsibilities you have. And the National Service Program, which you have well represented here in Massachusetts, simply says that if you join a community service program that's part of AmeriCorps, you can earn almost $5,000 a year against the cost of a college education while helping to solve the problems of people here in the United States. It's sort of a domestic Peace Corps. And this morning I met with a couple of hundred National Service Corps volunteers who are in the City Year Project in Boston, which a lot of you probably know about. Each of them telling me about what they're doing to try to help solve a human problem in the state of Massachusetts, not with some bureaucracy, but from the grassroots up. Just young people helping other people to make their lives better and earning some money for a college education. That is the ticket to America's future and the ticket to your future as well. Now, let me just say two or three things about this bill, and then I'll go sign it because it's getting warm in here. I tell you what, thank you. It's getting so warm, I'm about to think I'm in Arkansas, not in Massachusetts in October. But I have to say a few more things because now I'm getting to the part that you have to do something about. And this bill is a challenge to you as well. This bill does many things, and I won't tell you all about them, but I want to give you just a few examples. First thing this bill does is to encourage schools to take kids that are from underprivileged backgrounds and instead of separating them out from other students, bring them into the classrooms, have smaller classes, work with them, have kids help kids to everybody, get everybody in the mainstream, and everybody develop to the fullest of their God-given capacities. We know now that works better than separating kids out and trying to help them instead of bringing them in and challenging them to do the best they can do. Let me tell you what that means. That means that every one of you has to support that, not just the teachers. The school district needs to encourage that, especially for the younger kids. But if you have a friend in your class, or if you know a student who is not necessarily a friend of yours, who is struggling, you ought to see whether you or somebody else can help that student. We need to have more kids helping kids to learn in this country. We've got to have that. There are a lot of studies today, and I won't bore you with all of them, but basically there are a lot of studies on learning and how people learn. that show that some people learn best by just going home at night, opening the book, and working like crazy. But some people learn best in groups, from their friends and neighbors, from being free to ask when they don't know, and from getting help and from working through problems. There are a lot of young people who think they're not very smart, who maybe just don't learn very well in the way that they're being asked to learn. And you need to try to help them do better. Second thing I want to say is something that has already been alluded to here by the previous speakers. If we can't make these schools in this country safe, if children are not free of fear when they come to school, they are not going to learn very well. And this bill has a safe schools component, but it must be implemented. All we can do is give the means to make schools safe to local school districts. We in the national government don't do anything to make the schools safe. You do that. And you must, and every school must. The children of this country, even if they are scared to death on the streets, ought to feel safe when they're in their schools so they can learn. Third thing I want to say is, I'm getting sort of progressively more controversial maybe here, is there's an interesting provision of this bill that had enormous bipartisan support that provides opportunities for schools to get some help from this bill to develop what are now being called character education programs. Programs that basically enable schools to develop values that can be taught to students in the public schools based on a consensus of people in the community. I made this National Character Counts Week, putting government on the side of having the schools tell children that there is a difference between right and wrong, and there's some basic things that we ought to teach. There's a bipartisan Character Counts coalition in the Congress that's been working on this. We disagree about a lot of things, but we ought to be able to agree that our schools should say people should tell the truth. They should respect themselves and each other's. They ought to be good citizens, which means that we should assume responsibility, not for obeying the law and for helping others to develop themselves. We ought to practice fairness and tolerance and trustworthiness. These things should be taught in our schools, and we shouldn't gag our teachers when they try to do it. We ought to applaud them instead, and I hope we will be doing more and more of that. And now I'm going to ask you young people to do one more thing. There is a lot of evidence, and there's a new survey that's been put out today saying that in a modest but very clear way, drug use is going up again among young people in America. I hope you're clapping because you agree with what I said, not because you agree that it's a good thing. That more and more young people simply don't believe it's dangerous to use marijuana, for example, and that it's okay to do. Let me tell you something. Every single scientific study that has been done in the last several years shows alarming increases in the toxicity and the danger of using marijuana, especially to young women, and what might happen to their childbearing capacity in the future. All illegal drugs are dangerous. We have to drive down usage again. It has got to be not a good thing to do, not a cool thing to do. It is a stupid thing to do, as well as an illegal thing to do, and I want you to help bring it back down. Now, So this bill is about you. It's not about all of us politicians up here. It's about you. It's about your future. The age in which you are growing up and the world toward which you are going can be the best time America ever had. It will be exciting, and our diversity in America is a gold mine of opportunity. No other country is so well positioned to move into the 21st century, to live in a global society that is more peaceful and more secure? No one. But it all depends upon whether we develop the God-given capacity of every boy and girl in this country, no matter where they live, no matter what their racial or ethnic or religious background is. That is your challenge. Let's do it together. Thank you, and God bless you all.